Good morning, ladies and germs. Someone asked me yesterday if I painted all the tips on the few trees that I grafted, and the answer is yes, because I have a way of doing them so that I don't forget. And then I checked them as I walked back out the row. But another comment was, I had said 15 trees, and somebody said I think it was 18. I counted 18. Well, yeah, I don't know. I didn't count them. The gentleman told me there was about 15, and that's what I quoted in the video. But I didn't count them because I'm not charging him anyway. That's just a favor between friends, and a long-time client has been really good to me over the years, and that's the least I could do, is go do his little specialty grafting and just gratis. So, what was the other comment? Oh, how do you know where to cut down the tree to graft it? That was a good question. These trees here are kind of borderline for stumping the trees. There's some out here that are really bigger than I like to stump. And I've talked about the reason behind that. On the larger trees, well, let me start with the little ones. The ones I grafted yesterday, where you asked the question, where do I cut them? If they're 2 or 3, 4 inches in diameter, I go ahead and just stump them and put the grafts on the stump, because I'm not too concerned about flooding. But on larger trees, and these are kind of borderline, depending on the root stock, or how dwarfing the root stock is, there can be a fairly large root system that pumps a lot of water in the spring when the sap comes up, and I've talked about that. So when the root system gets really big, I worry that if we stump the tree, the signs will just sit in that sap and sour. Another determining factor of whether or not to stump the tree is, where are you in the window when it comes to grafting? Right now we're at the very front of the window for apple grafting, or for bark grafting rather, because the bark is just now slipping, just now starting to loosen up. The sap is just coming up. So if you can get them early in the window and they can start to heal in before the sap really starts flowing and there's danger of them flooding, then you can get away with it late in the season, and you can graft apples all the way up till the middle of May. But I would not stump trees of this size that late in the window, because I would be too concerned about flooding. So if the stump is, if they're bigger and we're concerned about that, then we go ahead and graft up into the leaders, they're called, or the primary scaffolds, 3 or 4 leaders if they're open center tree. But we graft up in the leaders, and that leaves some growth below the graft for the sap, someplace for the sap to go. And on the real large trees, old apple trees, we even leave one whole limb on the tree to take some of that excess sap. So I hope that answers your question about what determines where to cut them, or how I decide where to cut them. Let's see, that was the 3 comments, I think. So it looks like Victor's right on the tail end of this thing, and this is good timing. I got out here at the right time to show the crew where the next job is. In other videos, I've used the term apical dominance, and here's the example of that. When you don't cut most of the tree back to do the grafting, you just come in and graft on one limb, this is what happens. You see the growth they got? This was 2 years ago we grafted these. You know, they should be 6 to 10 feet long now, and there's about 2 feet here. And that's because of apical dominance. All the energy is going to the top. It's going up these other grafts. Some of the grafts will become dominant, and they're going to go straight up, and that's where all the energy, all the nutrients from the root system is going to go to the dominant grafts and right up to the top, and it sort of just aborts the grafts. It doesn't send any energy to the grafts, so they wind up doing this, and that's why we don't just typically we don't just go in and graft a lower limb on a tree. You want to get up over the stump and get on top, and that's where all the energy is going, so that's where you want your grafts to be. If you leave anything, a nurse limb, as we did here, you always want it to be lower than the grafting you're doing. You never leave a nurse limb higher than the graft. Now, this one happened to be on the southwest side of the tree where it got better light. So it did grow some, but this is still 2 years. It should be 10 feet tall instead of 4. If they had taken this limb off, then they could have forced the graft, we call it forcing, could have forced the graft to grow by eliminating all this. But since they left this, it took away some of the nutrients from the graft and put it into this natural union rather than the grafting union. Okay, hope some of that makes sense to you. I hope I explained it well enough. Here's another one that grew pretty well because this tree is open and it got some light. So there's about 6 feet of growth there, and that's good. But had they gone in and cut this off and forced this graft, it would have been the size of this by now. Okay, I think that's enough about that. I'm gonna go back to cutting wood for my friend Victor. And I'm trying to see where we grafted this morning. It may be eclipsed by that one little knoll out there. It's out in that area somewhere on the other side of the river. The owner was out and he explained why it is that we grafted only one limb 1 year and then come back a couple years later and do another limb. I had forgotten why. Once he mentioned it, it all came back to me, but the reason is because all of this root system would push so much into the grafts. They would grow about probably 6 feet the first year, maybe 8. And being such a vigorous root system, he didn't want that much growth. So he did only one limb, purposely to slow down the growth, because this particular variety is susceptible to something called bitter pit. And if they grow too vigorously, the apples get this thing called bitter pit. And you can Google that and learn probably way more than you want to know. So that's why we did one limb, to kind of slow them down a little bit. And this is really, normally we try to force a graft and we want to get all the growth we can, but in this case, he wanted it to come a little bit slower. And so I guess it's working out about the way he wanted it to. Not typically how we graft trees, but this is not a typical job. It's kind of a special thing we're doing here. And on these others that I showed you, where we put in these little ones, and I was talking about the apical dominance and how all the energy is bypassing the graft and going up this natural union. What we did here was just put in pollen. He put a little bit of pollinizer on each tree. Instead of doing every third tree, every third row, and doing the complete tree, just did one limb on each tree, it looks like. Okay, that's enough. I'm gonna go check on the next job. Well, they're saying it's gonna rain tonight, and I believe it. Look up there, up behind my house, higher elevation, it's snowing up there. Can't see the top of the ridge line. It's a whiteout. Okay, we are on our way to go look at the next job. Squirrel. If it's not raining tomorrow, we will come and do this job. And unless I book another job, we will be done with apples. Usually what happens is we'll get everything done that we have on the books, and we'll lay everybody off and they'll go get other jobs, and Victor will pack up and go back to Mexico, and then I'll get a phone call. Somebody wanting to do some grafting. That's usually how it works. Oh, what a view. You see that white orchard down there? That's what I was showing you the other day on the pears, the diatomaceous earth. So you can tell that's a pear orchard. Cherries all around it. Some of our grafted trees about 6 or 8 years ago. Squirrel. Now you can see the Columbia River. And this fence you see here, and there's some greenhouses up there. This is a marijuana farm. There's a lot of marijuana farms here in the state of Washington. The neighbors here are really unhappy about this. Makes it tough for the home values, because the surrounding houses, not much fun to live next to it. They said in August the smell gets pretty bad. So they're kind of unhappy about it, being close to their residences, which is understandable, I guess. Okay, that's about it for today. I got to get on the phone with that guy for tomorrow and find out where his graft wood is, and he don't have his trees cut down, and he works another job and does this orchard on the weekends. So I think we're going to have to cut them down for him, but I got to get it done before I lose my crew. So I will see you guys maybe tomorrow if it's not raining. If it's raining, if you wake up tomorrow morning and it's raining, just go ahead and roll over and go back to sleep. Just sleep in. As a matter of fact, take the day off. We'll catch up with you when we start working again.